video for you. And today we're going to have a discussion about something that has been on my mind lately, and that is a discussion about what's better, having a lot of knives or having one knife. I know many of you watching have bunches of knives, and I know many of you watching enjoy those knives immensely. And I have quite a few knives, and I enjoy them a whole lot. Now, you guys know that I have been sort of slowly reducing my collection, and I use that term very loosely. I'd love to know how many you have and what your thought process is. Are you aiming for more? Are you wanting to have less? Do you want to, switch out some budget stuff for higher end stuff? Do you want to switch out some budget higher end stuff and have more budget stuff? Do you have a goal that you're moving toward, and how many knives does that goal involve? All right, because I sincerely believe there are pluses and minuses to having more knives versus less knives. And I'm going to take it to the extreme, having a collection versus having just one pocket knife that you pretty much own, use, and carry all the time and have nothing else. All right, so the first thing is, what's good about owning lots of knives? Okay, well, first off, you have lots of knives. And that's awesome. Okay. I would like to know from you guys, if you do have lots of knives, are they mostly budget or high end? I think that's an interesting question to discuss. And of course, there's a big impact on your budget in that case, right? If you have tons of high end knives, you've probably taken a long time to get there. You probably think very carefully about what you buy. If you have a bunch of budget knives, if you're spending 30 or 40 bucks a piece, it's a little easier to have more and be a little less selective about what you buy. So what's good about it? Well, yeah, you have lots of knives. You have lots of variety in what you carry. And this is one of the things that I really enjoy. I like getting up and looking at my knife collection and deciding, what do I want to carry today? What am I doing today? What am I going to enjoy the most? And making a decision based on that about what I'm going to have in my pocket. And having lots of good options to me is a lot of fun. And um, I enjoy that a lot. I can definitely see how somebody may be like, no, I just want to get up, throw my knife in my pocket, and walk out the door. The other thing that I do is, and maybe you could call it even a bad habit. I don't know. Um, I will sometimes go home for lunch and switch my knife halfway through the day. I just like that variety in my carry. Now, sometimes it's driven by some other factor. Maybe I'm doing something different in the afternoon than what I was doing in the morning, and that certainly makes a difference. And that brings me to my next benefit here. You have a knife for every situation. So whether, you're going to work, if you work in an office, if you work on a construction site, if you're a first responder, you've got appropriate tools for that. And then maybe when you're, not on shift, you have some other knives that you carry in that situation. You've probably got outdoor knives, survival type knives, office knives, dress knives, beater knives. You have lots of different options for lots of different situations, which is of course lots of fun. And by the way, guys, that does often give us, what would you say, motivation to buy more stuff. And that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, is probably debatable. But it's definitely a thing. And I know I get lots of questions and I see lots of questions. I've started a new job or I've started a new hobby and I want the appropriate knife for that job or hobby or whatever the case may be. One thing I do want to point out here is there's a benefit to maintenance and longevity, okay? Myself and others that I know who have a lot of knives, you know, my knives don't, I mean, you can look at the knives here on the table. They look like they're in pretty good shape, and they are. Okay, because compared to someone who has one knife, right? I'm carrying this, 1/20th or 1/30th of the amount of time that someone who has one knife is carrying something, right? So you figure if you've got 30 knives or 40 knives, that fraction just keeps going down. So if care and maintenance becomes a real deal. If you are what attentive, I guess, to the needs of your knives and to taking good care of them and to being, very sort of careful and aware of, what you're doing and why you're doing it, then your knives can last a really, really long time because you're not carrying it every single day. Maybe you're carrying it one day a week, right? So that means where one person, who has one knife, okay, their knife is getting carried 352 days a year. Well, the other person who has 10 knives, or is carrying, like, even if you had 7 knives, you carried a different one every day of the week, that means you're carrying your knife only 50 days a month. Wow. 50 days a year, meaning a lot less use is getting put on each individual knife. And that makes a big, big difference. I mean, I've had this knife for, I don't know, 5 years probably, and it's still in really, really good condition. I carry it quite a bit. I use it quite a bit. I think I've sharpened this because I've had it longer. I've sharpened this, I think 2 or 3 times. Um, where I've done a full, material removal type of sharpening, and that demonstrates the point I'm trying to make. If this was my only knife, and this was the knife I carried, I EDC'd it every single day, in 5 years, who knows how many times I would have sharpened it. But because I carry this, once in every 10 days or something, you don't put as much wear and tear on a knife. You just don't. In fact, oftentimes the most wear and tear that my knives get is when I'm actually preparing for a review. I do a bunch of cutting. I purposely try to, find a grip that's uncomfortable. I try to cut stuff that's difficult to cut so that I can feel how this knife is going to perform. Sometimes, let's say it's a frame lock. You'll get a knife where if you really push down on the blade, the frame lock will move on you. If you get a knife that is super uncomfortable or that feels pretty comfortable now, you go and start whittling on some wood for a long time or cutting up a squash or something that's really difficult to cut, and all of a sudden you'll discover that there are some really uncomfortable places on that knife. Okay, so I go out of my way to do all of that kind of stuff when I'm preparing to make a video and to share a knife with you and tell you guys what I think about it. Now, the other thing is, I will say, if you have a lot of knives, you'll sometimes become, I don't know, a little bit judgmental. And what I mean by that is, I've had tons of knives. I've handled hundreds and hundreds of knives. And because of that, I've seen certain things over and over again. Right. So I've seen lock bar cutouts that are done a certain way. The 10 before, and now a new knife comes out, it's got the lock bar cut that way. And I go, yeah, it's going to be an issue, right? I don't need to hold the knife. I don't need to know anything about the knife. I can just look at it, and I've had 10 just like it before, so I already know what problems that knife is going to have, okay? And every once in a while, you're surprised, and there are some knives where there's a potential issue, but I get it anyway, or especially if a knife is super popular, and I know you guys are going to want to see it, then I'll go out of my way to get my hands on something. And, when I have some time once I've spent some time checking it out, I'm like, hey, I thought this was going to be a real problem, but it turns out it isn't. That's definitely a thing, but right, you definitely start to draw conclusions about knives very quickly, and in the vast majority of the cases, in like 99.9% of the time, you're exactly right. Okay, there's nothing new under the sun. And most times, if you don't like a blade that has a certain grind, or if you find a certain feature is always uncomfortable, guess what? The next knife that has that feature, it's probably still uncomfortable. All right, so you do get to, what would you say? You build in some biases. The more knives you handle, you definitely gain some experience and gain some knowledge, and some of it's legitimate and some of it is your own personal bias. You've been put off by a certain feature many times before, so you can become a little bit judgmental. Let's see, what else? Oh, you have assets, right? So if I'm, let's say, and this is something that happens pretty frequently. A few weeks ago, we were going on vacation. I had put a bunch of money aside for vacation, and I wanted just a little bit more. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to dip into savings, and I've got other commitments for the other money. So I'll sell a couple of knives. I'll put those funds into, toward the vacation, and it gives me that little extra cushion that I wanted, right? And by the way, in my case, I didn't end up using extra money on vacation. I was able to sort of reinvest that money back into some other knives when I got back. But you have that option, especially if you kind of take care of your knives and if you pay attention to regular maintenance. Sharpening is a thing, and we've kind of already touched on it a little, but I want to say a little bit more about sharpening. If you regularly strop your knives, you may rarely have to sharpen most of your knives. Now, I like to keep my knives really, really sharp, and I do strop them regularly. And if they, when I find they're not responding the way I want them to, then I definitely probably sharpen more than is necessary. All right, and I'm sure many of us knife guys do, because we want that hair popping razor edge where sort of a non-knife guy would be like, I tried to cut some cheese the other day, the knife still cut it, I'm not going to change it. Which, hey, that's their prerogative. Let's switch up the scenery here a little bit again. Okay, so what else have we got here? Oh, yeah. Number 6, your family and friends think that you're crazy, which is definitely beneficial. When you want to do something that's a little bit crazy, you're like, hey, everyone already thinks I'm nuts, so I can kind of do whatever I want. All right, now what about the benefits of having one single knife? And there are, one of the things that I tried to do with this video is get some knives that I could see someone owning and being like, yep, this is the perfect thing. I don't need anything else. All right. I'm going to close these so I can fit more knives on screen. And I actually think all of these that I'm showing here are pretty decent options. This is the Rake 875. Okay, so by the way, for anyone who's asking, and there will be people asking, this is a Chris Reeve Knives Nkosi with micarta inlay. This is a Riot Knives Torrent. This is a Real Steel 875. This is a Spyderco Paramilitary 2. This is a Bestech Ascot. This is a Cold Steel 8010. And this, of course, is an Ontario Knives Rat Model 1. Now, let's get back to our discussion here. What about the benefits of owning just one knife? Well, first of all, you've kind of found a happy place, okay? If you've tried a bunch of knives and you've settled on one that you feel like is just perfect for you and you never need to look again, that's pretty cool, right? And just the idea that you can kind of wake up in the morning and the perfect knife is just waiting there for you to go in your pocket and accompany you through the day, that's totally fantastic. So number one benefit is, yeah, you found something really, really special. A great knife that can really accompany you everywhere is really, really special. Second, you're sensible, okay, and normal. The rest of us are a little nuts because we're constantly trying to buy the next thing. So yeah, it's definitely you're more sensible, and I dare say the vast majority of the knife owning public are this way. They don't own 10 knives, they don't own 20 knives or 40 or 140. They just own one, possibly two, if they have like a slip joint or something they use for dress carry. Okay. So yeah, you're definitely more mainstream than some of us knife nuts out there. Uh, Also, though, um, you don't spend all your money on knives. You're probably not watching this video anyway, but you have money for food and clothing and gas for your car, and you never have to worry about being so broke you can't buy that stuff because you spent $1,000 on a knife yesterday, and now you're like, crap, I could have used that $1,000 for something else. Um, so that of course is probably one of the real benefits. But also what you like. Okay, you have found something that really really suits you. And the fact is, if you do ever have to buy something else, okay, maybe you go and buy the same knife. But even if you don't buy the exact same knife, you have a really really strong sense of what you like. So if you do have to go buy something else, it's an easy choice for you. You just kind of go, hey, this is exactly like the knife I used to have that I loved and didn't want to change, but maybe it broke or you got lost or whatever. So you can just go buy essentially the exact same thing again and you're golden. Now, what about the downside of owning many knives? Well, downside number one, if you own a bunch of knives, if you own 25 knives already or more, you probably also want all the other knives. Okay, at that point, I don't know what the number is. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, but at some point, you're into it, you've got the bug, and you want every new knife that you see that you're even remotely interested in. All right, that's one of the downsides. Downside number two, you're broke. All right, even though you want that new knife, you probably can't buy it because you just spent all your money on the previous knife you loved and had to have more than anything else. You have to spend money on Pelican cases. All right, most people don't have to do that unless they, right, have a nice handgun that they're protecting. You can't figure out what to carry every day. I made a whole video about this that was kind of tongue in cheek and a lot of fun, but you have to figure out, oh, what am I going to bring with me today? What am I doing? What pants am I wearing? All that kind of stuff. You want the name and cost of every knife in this video. So you're the one who is going to comment down below, hey, what are all those knives? Because I may want to go out and buy those as well. All right, the downside of owning just one knife. Okay, first of all, wear and tear. Right? If you own one knife and that's all you own and that's all you ever carry, that knife takes a beating. Okay, it does all the things that you want it to do, and that's fantastic. But it probably has to be sharpened quite frequently. You've got to a little more commonly do your routine scheduled maintenance, whatever that may be. You know, take it down, clean it, spray it out with forced air, lubricate it, all that kind of good stuff. That needs to be done more frequently, especially if you've got a knife with bearings. You need to consider all kinds of factors before you pick. When you do need a new knife, you know, you can't be like, oh yeah, I like this one for that job, I like that one for this job. You know, you have to be pretty careful because that's the one knife that has to really do everything. Maybe, by the way, thinking about this, I know some guys, and on Instagram it doesn't look like this, but I know because I either know them personally or I follow them a little more closely, or we've had conversations about it. I know a few guys who kind of one time or maybe two times went out and spent a lot of money. So, you know, maybe they own two or three, you know, multi-$100 knives. Maybe it's, you know, two or three full customs. And all they do is trade those knives out. So, you know, they own one for a few months or even a few weeks or even a few days in some cases. And then, you know, it's sort of like they've got to try it. It's cool. They enjoyed it, but now it's time to move on to something else. And they're going to see, you know, what kind of trade they can make for the next great thing that they're going to pick up. And that's kind of interesting. You know, one of the guys I know, you know, he's handled knives that I will never handle, right? He's handled stuff that, and he's owned stuff that to me is a not even a grail. It's like outside of the realm of grail because it's just unrealistic for me to even think about having. But he's owned this stuff because he only, you know, he's like, well, I bought one custom knife and then just kind of kept trading through all kinds of other custom knives. And he's had some really nice stuff doing that. And if that's how he wants to enjoy the hobby, hey, that's great. More power to him. The other big, there's a couple downsides to this. You know, if you don't own multiple knives, you're probably not watching this video, and think of how much you're missing, not getting to hear me yammer on about this fairly niche subject, okay? You can probably, I don't know, watch educational videos or learn how to repair your car or something like that. And who wants to do that when you could be talking about knives? So that's definitely a thing. You also missed Nick's video about missing out. You probably don't even care about missing out. But it was a really good discussion. By the way, if you're watching this and you haven't seen it yet, go over and check out Nick's video. He has a whole discussion about one of the ways they market to us, which is getting us to be afraid that we're missing out on something fantastic. And if you have lots of knives, that video is all about you. All right, now the last thing I'd like to say is, where do you fit in? Which of these characters would you like to be? You know, when I first got into this, my thought was, you know, I only need one knife and I'm going to just try out a few different ones until I find the one that's really, really perfect. And I found some great knives along the way, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. And you know, I really, really enjoy that search, and I love it when I'm able to find something fantastic and share it with you guys. I really do. That is the funnest part of this whole thing, is to find something that is spectacular and be able to tell you guys about it. And on the opposite side of that, I really hate when I get something that sucks. Not only for me, but I hate having to share with you guys that it sucks. So, you know, I kind of, there is a part of me, and I'm sure there's a part of each of us that thinks, you know, maybe someday there'll be one knife that just speaks to me and connects with me on such a deep level that I'm just happy to sell everything else and only carry that from now on. And maybe some of you have found that knife, and if you have, I'd love to hear it down in the comments. I have put a link in the description box to DLT Trading. I like DLT a lot. I've got quite a number of knives from them. If you're watching in Canada, you should know I've only had good luck ordering from them. I've never had anything from them stopped. I've never had anything from them have any issues getting across the border. And that's certainly something we have to consider if we're up here, which definitely is not a lot of fun. But even if you're not, yeah, go to DLT Trading, use those links, use that link. It does help the channel a whole lot. I mean, all the stuff you do helps the channel. When you know, follow my links to the latest Mass Drop knife, and I've got one coming, by the way, the Thresher is on the way. When you use White Mountain Knives and use my discount code, I love all that. And it's a huge help to the channel, and you guys don't even realize, I'm not, I don't have any plans to do Patreon or anything like that, but this hobby is an expensive hobby, and it becomes much more expensive if you decide to make videos about it. So thanks a lot for all the support. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear all of your comments. This is a discussion I'd really like to have with anyone in person, and I have had it with a few people, but that's kind of why I do this. It gives me a chance to discuss with you guys sort of what's going through my mind. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.